Hi guys, and welcome to the podcast. I am, of course, your host and podcast founder, Lawrence Francis. I just want to take this opportunity to give you a quick overview of this series, which features coverage of the Dublin Wine and Cheese Festival, which took place at Iveagh Gardens in central Dublin between the 8th and the 11th of August 2019, which will air on the Interpreting Wine podcast between episodes 289 and episode 300. This will feature a mixture of talks and one-to-one interviews with some of the leading lights in the Irish and international wine scene. This consumer fair is now in its second year, and I was seriously impressed with the quality of speaker overall. I think that events of this type really lend themselves well to being covered for the podcast, and would love to feature more events of this kind in the future. So without further ado, here is today's episode of the Dublin Wine and Cheese Festival 2019 series. Today's episode of the podcast features a one-to-one interview with Lynne Coyle, MW. We hear her origin story into the wine business and developing to be an MW. She talks mentorship, Wine Spirit Women, the group which she co-founded, and consumer events and media. Enjoy.
I grew up a daughter of hoteliers in Scotland. Didn't live in a house until I was late teens, and food and wine was basically part of my DNA. And I didn't really hook into my real interest in wine until I went to college to study hotel management. And there was a wine module during the course, and I really enjoyed it. So after college, I decided to spend some time in Italy, in Tuscany, coincidentally, and didn't go there with an idea of pursuing a wine passion, but ended up spending time, or my friend in Italy was actually engaged to one of the people who owned a Vignanese at the time. And my first absolute wine experience was one night, cold March evening in Italy, and Leonardo brought out this half bottle of golden liquid, which became apparent as the evening went on that it was something really special, and it was a Vignanese's Vinsanto. So at the time I just really enjoyed the evening, enjoyed the wine, and that was the first time that wine actually spoke to me, if you like, that I found something really interesting about it, something very different. I didn't realise till much later, of course, that it's an iconic wine and it was really, really expensive and that it was a real treat. But that was the first time that I really looked at wine with a different pair of eyes. And when I came back home to Scotland, I decided to start to do a bit of studying, a bit of research, took some Wine and Spirit Education Trust courses, and my path was set from there, to be honest. I really became very, very interested in the topic. Okay, so from there, I was still working in the hotel trade, and at one point I was asked if anyone knew anything about wine. And in those days, a wine list would say Chablis, Côte du Rhône, Bordeaux. You didn't necessarily even get into producer or, in fact, vintage detail. It was very much pick some wines that would go with the menu in the restaurant. And I was tasked with that, and after I did that, my wine module at college had helped me. After I did that, I was asked if I could buy the wines that I had actually selected for the wine list, and I really enjoyed that experience of tasting, meeting suppliers, comparing the different wines, and kind of opened up the idea to me that somebody somewhere must have a job of selecting wines. So I decided to pursue that interest, and I spoke to various people in the wine industry, was advised that retail was a really good course of action in terms of trying to pursue a career in wine. I joined Oddbins in Scotland and ended up working for Oddbins for 18 years. Started as a sales assistant and ended up as basically head of buying in Oddbins in the UK. And that time was spent in shops. It was spent with on-trade customers, but it was also spent in the buying team, and that's where it all kind of spiraled from to. In terms of the Master of Wine, I had first an interest in Scotland, in fact, when I was still living in Scotland, working for Oddbins. But around a few months after I started the Master of Wine course, in Scotland, under the mentorship of a Master of Wine in Scotland, I actually was promoted and got a job with Oddbins in London and moved down south. And my actual career in wine outside of studying for Master of Wine became tied up in being an area manager, then joining a buying department. I was really, really busy at work, so it's an ambition that I abandoned for some while. But I moved to Ireland this 13 years ago now, and having been in London, I started to feel slightly isolated from the global wine picture in Dublin, because I just didn't see as many people as I used to see in London. There weren't as many tastings, although having said that, the truth is that we have loads and loads of tastings in Dublin, and we've always got winemakers in Dublin. But at the time, for some reason, I felt maybe I wasn't accessing that. So I decided to go back and look at the Master of Wine programme, and joined the programme in 2009 and progressed then, became a Master of Wine in 2015. But it was a long-held ambition that I finally put came to fruition in 2009 when I joined the programme formally, and the rest is history from that point of view. When I moved to Ireland, to Gilbey's, who were part of Diageo. They were the distribution arm of Diageo, and I moved there as a buyer and looked after buying and marketing, and then started the Master of Wine while I was there. Diageo were very supportive of the idea, and then I moved to O'Brien's while I was actually still studying for the Master of Wine. So my current role, I'm wine director at O'Brien's, and my current role, I was essentially doing that role when I became a Master of Wine. I mean, people do the Master of Wine for different reasons. For me, it was a very personal ambition, something that I'd always wanted to do. I wanted to immerse myself in the research and the fine detail that's required to study that programme. And that was a very personal ambition of mine. I didn't particularly at the time see it as a major career-changing thing, because I was very comfortable and happy in the role that I had, and I actually like buying wine. I like the everything that goes along with being a wine buyer. So I wasn't really necessarily expecting a major career change with the Master of Wine, but there's definitely been major benefits to becoming a Master of Wine. I think anyone who's considering doing the Master of Wine programme, to be honest, when you first become a student, one of the most incredible things that you'll see is that you have access to people and wineries and wines from around the world that you may just not have had access to before. The industry is extremely generous to students and to Masters of Wine in terms of sharing their knowledge, opening their doors and giving access. And also you have amazing opportunities to meet just within the student body, but it's a global organisation with global reach, so the opportunities in terms of internationally to network, to meet new people, to share ideas is just something that is, you can't really predict how amazing that's going to be when you're looking on the outside, but when you get to the inside, that's one of the major advantages of that programme. And is the student body itself is just so interesting and diverse. So that's one of the advantages definitely to being a Master of Wine, is that you have that access and you get to do interesting things and you get to taste amazing wines and speak to like-minded people, and you can have endless conversations and contact with people who are interested in the same things as you are. In the meantime, your own personal, professional excellence is being developed, and you then have the opportunities I now do to help and bring on other people who are interested in that programme. And that's for me, one of the most satisfying parts of having become a Master of Wine, is the opportunity to actually help other people on that journey.
I'm super happy that you naturally brought up that idea of mentoring other people and, using your position really and your status to draw other people through. And I'm kind of just curious really. I mean, we're here in 2019, we've got Instagram, we've got emails, we've got so many ways to kind of reach out to people. What are your thoughts on mentorship, in this day and age?
Okay. So I think the thing about mentorship is that it can be a formal process. So, for example, the Institute of Masters of Wine have a formal mentoring programme, and has rules and regulations around how to engage both for the mentor and the mentees. But in this day and age, it doesn't need to be a formal program, and you can mentor someone in a 5-minute conversation. You can mentor someone by email, you can mentor someone face to face. It can literally be you're running to do something into a meeting and your mentee calls you and says, what do you think about this? And you can give someone, it doesn't always have to be this is what you should do. It could be, have you thought about this? Is this another way to approach it? Have you asked someone else about this? Mentoring doesn't have to be a formal, scary thing. Maybe coaching is a good word, or just helping someone draw out their own ideas and draw out their own potential. And that's what I think is really important about trying to help people in the industry, or when people come to you for advice. I think you should be generous with your time. I always find people very generous with their time. When I was coming through, and people were always, and still are, very generous as an industry with their time and advice, and I always try to do the same. And as I say, it doesn't have to be a formal thing. It can be a very informal thing. It can be a few minutes or a few minutes of your time giving someone a bit of advice, or saying, consider this, think about that, this happened to me once, here's another way to think about it. It's just giving people the opportunity to widen their thought process and come to as informed a decision about something, or as informed a way of doing something as they can. Giving them confidence, almost. Giving them self-belief is the big thing. We all have doubts, and it's good to knock a few ideas around and give someone a bit of, yeah, that can work. So we started Wine Spirit Women in March 2019, so March this year. A colleague and myself, Justin McGovern, and followed an event we went to in London, and we both came out feeling really inspired and really felt that it was a great opportunity to think about doing a give back organisation for the trade in Ireland. And we set about setting it up without, classic, not really thinking about the commitment that was going to be involved. But there's already at the moment, we've got over 80 members. We've just had our second event. We've just secured Champagne Ayala as our bursary programme for WSET and sommelier training for young people coming through the industry. So, and we've seen some already some fantastic results from just the networking that's gone on there from the first event. One of the ladies who went along has managed to get distribution in China. On the back of it, a student has managed to get an internship at a winery in France. And I've now got men coming to me asking for advice because they want a woman to do something for them, and they're now coming saying, are any of your women able for this? We've got journalists who have journalists who have actually moderated at our last event, which was a panel discussion. So we're trying to appeal to, it's supposed to be positive, it's supposed to be inspirational, it's not anti-male, men are very welcome, and it's supposed to be about encouraging networking and giving people a space to speak to each other who are in the trade, who would maybe normally be competitors, but a safe place for them to share ideas and to get to know each other. And it's working well at the moment.
We're here in Dublin in Iveagh Gardens, a beautiful setup, the Wine and Cheese Festival. And yeah, I'm super interested in consumer events. I'm not spent the whole of my life in the wine industry. I'm still believe that there's so much more actually that the wine industry can do to draw people in, and wine can be a kind of an intimidating space. So I wonder if you would just, I guess, look ahead to the talks and potentially some of the interactions that you think you might have over this weekend, with people who maybe have had their confidence knocked in the past. So, how do you personally go about bringing those people in and getting them into the wine fold?
Okay. So, first thing I'd like to say about consumer events is that the biggest wine consumer event in Ireland is run by O'Brien's Wines, which is a company I work for, and we typically see 2,000 consumers over 2 days, and we do that in May and November. And we are completely wine-only events. We have no food at all. But what we find is, and we'll find the same today and other consumer wine events in Dublin, the consumers are really, really interested in wine, and Irish consumers are extremely educated about wine, and they're very, very open-minded. So a bit like the UK, we don't have a long history of winemaking here. Very tiny few people are doing it here. So our consumers in Ireland are really open-minded. They're very happy to taste wine from Chile, Uruguay, South Africa, France, Spain, or whatever. And they have very good knowledge of grape varieties. They know what they like. And my approach at the talks, and I think you'll find that the approach at a lot of the talks, is that the objective is to be approachable, that wine isn't an elitist, it's for enjoyment, and just to try and demystify. But there'll be some technical information as well, because, as I say, our consumers are educated and interested and engaged. You'll see lots of young women, which is fantastic, who have an interest in wine, and people are genuinely really interested to learn. And food and wine matching is very big in Ireland as well. So people always want to know, what can I eat with this wine, or does this wine work with this type of food? So this type of event is amazing because it's, high quality, city centre Dublin, and it's relaxed and informal, so people have the chance to learn about wine in a friendly and approachable place. I think in the wine trade, and if you're a professional wine person, you can fall into the trap of being writing about things that are too technical, or writing about things that interest the trade. It's important that you write about things that interest the consumer. So if I'm writing an article, I do try to put technical information in there, but I also try to think about what people might be interested to read about, and the types of questions that I'm asked when I'm doing tastings. I try to write about those things, because quite often they are similar questions that come up from time to time. So I try to say, well, that's interesting, how could I write about that, or is there an article there? And I do think that's really important, because people in the industry are, after all, only buying it and selling it. Our objective is to get it out there and to get people to enjoy the wines. So I always try to take what I'm asked and say, right, let's address that question, or let's try and write about it, or let's write. My latest article in my website was about a master sommelier who's just made his first wine, and I think that's interesting because people are always interested to hear about sommeliers. So I thought, I'll write about Dimitri's wine, because people want to know about what sommeliers get up to. So it's good to write about, and also things that tap into culture. So if it's, St Paddy's Day, write about something to do with a wine with Celtic connections, or if it's try to find a cultural reference so as that it makes it more accessible.
Thank you so much to Lynne for appearing. It was really great having you on. Please see below for the website and main social media handles for O'Brien's Wine. And of course, I'd love to have you following along with me on social media, where I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, at Wine Podcast on Twitter, and email hello@interpretingwine.com. Next time on the podcast, in episode 292, I'll feature a talk on American wine with one of the busiest presenters at the fair, Rory Craig of Station to Station Wine. See you then.